Estonian digital ambassador, and Carmen is the International Cybersecurity Cooperation Advisor at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, and formerly the Digital Transformation Advisor. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Carmen. Carmen.
Thank you so much. And I am very sorry for those who were expecting Nele instead of me. We had a last-minute scheduling error, but I will do my very best to give you an overview of the digital advancements in Estonia. I am trying to get my slides. All right. So currently, thank you for the kind introduction. Currently, I work at the National Cybersecurity Department, but previously the entire digital transformation was my sort of bread and butter. And if you get any questions that I left unanswered, my email address is below as well. But without further ado, let's get going. I know that this is a healthcare conference, but like I already hinted, we cannot really talk about the entirety of digital development in healthcare without discussing the policy and the digital-minded leadership of the entire countries, right? And Estonia here holds a very unique experience because we started our digitalization journey already in the 90s. So when we regained our independence back, the very honest truth here is that we were left with bad economy, a country that was full of corruption and not many resources to move forward. But fortunately enough, Estonia had quite a lot of visionaries and tech savvy people who understood that in order to catch up to our Western neighbors, we cannot do everything the old fashioned and analog way. We have to leverage digitalization and the potential it brings to build up a strong democracy and a strong economy as well. And I love to compare building up digital societies to building to a house. Because if you don't really lay a strong foundation for your house, it doesn't matter what you're going to build on top. It can be a fancy, expensive castle, but the odds are that that castle might collapse while you're even inside it. So Estonia managed to do this part right. We managed to build a strong infrastructure already in early 2000s, which then allowed us to start building all of these different services on top. And by the way, we still use the same infrastructure to this day. So for us, it's not about using the latest technology always, it's about using resilient technology. Of course, we're constantly working on it to make sure it doesn't turn into a legacy or a cybersecurity nightmare. But if you do it right at the beginning, then it's going to be far easier in the long run. And where are we nowadays? So nowadays, 99.9% of state services in Estonia have been digitalized already. There's only one service we cannot access online, and that's getting a divorce. Everything else, including internet voting, getting your prescription medicine, accessing all your medical data since 2008, has been digital for us. And news for people who are becoming 100% digital very soon because we're also digitalizing divorce. One might think that once we're fully digital, all services are accessible online, then we've reached sort of the finish line and that's it. No progress needed when it comes to digital services. Unfortunately, times have developed and technology especially has moved on. So nowadays, even with 100% digital public services, we're behind. We have to leverage new technologies to make sure that we still remain a human-centric and transparent society. And before I start talking about, sorry, I'm trying to change my slide. Okay, so before I start talking about sort of the future advancements, my very strong belief nowadays is that democracy has a digital spirit. Our most fundamental rights are practiced online nowadays. And if the public sector doesn't provide people the space to practice these rights online and access all of these different services, then we might start harming our democracy altogether. I mentioned that Estonia used to deal with a lot of corruption in the 90s. Nowadays, we're considered to be one of the most transparent societies in the world. So we're one of the most transparent, one of countries with least amount of corruption in the world. And we've managed to do such a 180 turn so quickly because of digitalization. The truth is, doesn't matter if we're talking about healthcare sector or any other sector, it's easier to be corrupt on paper, right? And coming to more of the projects. So we have categorized three sort of different eras when it comes to digitalization. So the very first digitalization era from 2000s to 2010, just enhancing traditional public services online. It's more so back-end developments. So it benefited doctors more, benefited other public sector employees. But for end users, it didn't really have a huge noticeable effect. But that was the beginning for all, right? Digitalized data, um, creating more and more interoperability and so on. And then in 2010 to 2020, keep in mind this is more so Estonia centric, you can already see more benefits as an end user. So you can access all services online, you save more time, services are more transparent and understandable. But the problem here still is that they tend to be quite reactive. So you as a citizen have to understand what services you now have to access, what you're obligated to do, but also what are your opportunities. Whereas and maybe one reason why is because public sectors and also healthcare sectors in many countries are part of the public sector. We hold monopolies on services. So this means that we don't really have competitors. There's only one place where you must declare your taxes and you don't have any other options. There's only one prescription solution you can access, and that's it. No other options, right? And that means that we're not really motivated to make sure that our services are top-notch, human-centric, empowering, as transparent as possible, and proactive. But nowadays, we want to learn more and more from the private sector and make sure that we bring this human centricity to the public sector as well. And how we're doing this currently is through our personal government project. Sorry, I'm trying to change the slides again, but it's not. If okay, good, thank you. So essentially, I already hinted that we are quite reactive when it comes to our services, and also, uh, and it's a problem. Doesn't matter if we talk about healthcare, right, or if we talk about any other kind of service. If I bring this comparison to the healthcare sector, we we don't really focus on prediction as much as we should, right? And it's a common knowledge nowadays that predicting is far cheaper and brings more valuable or brings easier life experience to people. But we always deal with, or almost always deal with, consequences as healthcare providers. And this demands a more societal change. And how personal government affects healthcare sector is that we want to leverage huge amount of health data that we have. So since 2008, doctors became obligated to digitalize health data, right? We want to leverage all the data that we have. Additionally, Estonia has a very big genome bank. So we have a state issued or state held biobank where 20% of adult population have donated their genome data for the purposes of science. But science has evolved so much nowadays that we can use that genome data to not only tell us about the past of Estonians, but we can also focus towards our future, right? And especially combining past health data, combining genome data if people wish so. Bear in mind, we have a national health insurance scheme, no private sector health insurance schemes. And also different lab results, we can start giving people very accurate advice what they can do to keep themselves as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And also, whenever we are thinking about technological advancements in healthcare, we always think, how can we empower our doctors? The truth is, unfortunately, we are not going to have more healthcare workers, at least not in Estonia, because our population is aging and it's declining. So that actually means that we have more need for healthcare in the future, but less people to provide the healthcare, unless something very dramatic changes. And we see that technology for us is the only option to carry on our solidarity-based healthcare system, make sure that our doctors are not overwhelmed and burn out and leave the industry altogether. And how we're doing this is we're trying to make sure that they're not detectives anymore. We can analyze data for them, provide them treatment recommendations, make sure that they take into account, for example, different chronic illnesses and past or prescriptions they're currently taking, and offer new treatment guidelines. Um, Also, doctors can fully focus on the patient, right, and not be the detective I mentioned. Additionally, we are going through life events more so than singular events, or well, there are singular events, but they combine to be a life event where different ministries, public-private service providers are involved. And one example here is, for example, having a baby. This life event in Estonia starts during pregnancy and hence during the child going to the kindergarten. And this process involves a lot of different services provided by healthcare service providers, um, private service providers, and so on. So we have already done a very good job in connecting those services and making sure that, for example, parents don't forget to register their child to the nearest preschool. So our goal is to make sure that parents don't forget to do these necessary things and they don't wake up 1 month before their child has to attend kindergarten, because in bigger centers they might not find a place for their child anymore. And also this proactiveness allows us to, and data-based decision making allows us to plan better. If kindergartens can see how many kids they get in 2 or 3 years, they can accurately plan on finding new teachers, allocating space more accurately, and so on. So they, just to conclude sort of the personal government, we want to make sure that people are not in a situation where they don't know what they have to know. Services reach them as quickly as the need arises, because the longer a person stays in a vulnerable situation, the harder it is to get them out right. And this also applies to healthcare. And last but not least, I see my time is running out. For the next slide, we also cannot skip the topic of artificial intelligence. And before we start talking about AI plans in the future in Estonia, let me tell you a story about an Estonian mythological creature called Krat. Krat is a mythological being that our ancestors used to build out of household objects they did not need. This is in fairy tales, of course. And you donate 3 drops of blood, and Krat would come to life and start doing household chores for you that you yourself didn't really want to do or have time to do. But of course, stories like this hold a strong but. And the but here is that if you were not the smart owner, Krat would end up killing you. And we decided to do something somewhat controversial and name artificial intelligence in the Estonian public sector Krat. One reason why we did so is because we want to combine the modern with the old and the traditional to make sure that the modern spaces also carry on Estonian tradition and mythology. But also, it's a powerful reminder for us people who work together with artificial intelligence and developing AI solutions for public use. Because if you're not a smart owner, you might end up doing something very destructive with artificial intelligence, right? If you take a bias database, you might implement that bias across the whole society. So KRAT is a subtle reminder for us what's at stake. And bureaucrat or bureaucrat is an ecosystem of different AI solutions. So very similar to Siri or Alexa, but just for public sector services. We can use voice assistants to make sure that, for example, people who for any reason are not able to use keyboards can still access public services as conveniently as possible. We can access public services and information 24/7, so we don't have to rely on business hours. And additionally, it will not only be a chatbot where we can access information, but bureaucrat will be everyone's personal assistant when it comes to public sector services. You can not only ask about, hey, when does my passport expire? But when bureaucrat notices that, hey, your passport is about to expire, it can offer you help with reapplying for a new one. And last but not least, if I go to my last slide now, we are always talking about human-centric societies and societies that have to serve people, right? Not people serve our societies. And this also includes our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs lift up our economy, so we always have to make sure that that they can drive when it comes to their business ideas. And an Estonian specific problem here is that we are a very small country, which means that we never have enough people for anything. Just 1.3 million people, but we are the same size as the Netherlands, for example. Estonia is even bigger than Denmark. So more than 95% of our enterprises are small or medium-sized. And this leaves a challenge for our SMEs where they don't have enough people, but they have to deal with bureaucracy and administrative burden almost as much as bigger companies have to deal with. So with real-time economy, we're currently in the process of standardizing data for our businesses, making data machine readable, and automating different kinds of processes like e-invoicing, e-logistical procedures. And in 2020, we had a pilot where we found out that real-time economy will start saving our entrepreneurs 14 million working hours annually and 200 million euros per year. So the biggest benefit here will be to our SMEs who now can solely focus on their business ideas, and they don't have to be an accountant, a salesperson, a CEO, and so on all at once. And with this, I see that I am right in time as well. I just to skip to my last slide. I thank you for getting me the platform to explain you the digital society in Estonia. I know that it's not very healthcare focused, but it's very important to notice here that we are policy-wise, service-wise, we are all evolving together. And if we're talking about personal services, it won't only affect entrepreneurs or healthcare service providers and so on. We as a society as a whole have to move forward and bring new levels to our public services. Thank you so much and have a lovely day at the conference.